In the quiet Devon village of Abbotskerswell, on the 15th of August, 1864, a boy was born who would one day become known across Britain as the man they couldn't hang. His name was John Henry. George Lee, remembered in history as John Babbacombe Lee. Lee's early years were marked by hardship and restlessness. He served briefly in the Royal Navy before drifting into a life of odd jobs and petty crime. A conviction for theft left a stain on his name, but by 1884 he had found a fresh start, working as a footman and handyman for a wealthy widow named Miss Emma Keyse at her seaside home known as the Glen, overlooking the tranquil waters of Babbacombe Bay near Torquay, England. It was a place of peace and privilege, yet below its calm exterior, fate was quietly preparing one of the most extraordinary chapters in Victorian criminal history. John Lee, the only male servant in the house, could not have imagined that his name would soon be tied to a brutal murder, a sensational trial, and a failed execution that would shock an entire nation. On the cold night of 15th of November 1884, the quiet serenity of Babbacombe Bay was shattered by horror. Inside the grand seaside home known as the Glen, its owner, Miss Emma Keyse, was found brutally murdered. Her skull had been struck, her throat cut, and the house set ablaze. A desperate attempt, it seemed, to erase all trace of the crime. Among the few occupants of the house that night was John Babbacombe Lee, the only male servant in Miss Keyse's employ. When the smoke cleared, Lee insisted he was innocent, claiming he had been asleep or unaware of what truly happened in the chaos of the fire. But the evidence, though entirely circumstantial, began to turn against him. He was the only adult man present in the house. A cut on his arm was seen as suspicious, though Lee said it came from breaking a window to let the smoke escape. Investigators found blood stains, traces of paraffin oil, and suggested a motive Miss Keyse had recently reduced his wages, possibly angering him. The press seized the story, and soon the peaceful village of Babbacombe became the center of a sensational Victorian murder mystery. Every clue, every stain, every rumor seemed to point in one direction toward John Lee, a man who swore he had done nothing, yet could not escape the tightening grip of suspicion. In early 1885, the case of John Babbacombe Lee reached the courtroom of the Exeter Assizes, drawing the eyes of the nation. The evidence was thin, built entirely on circumstance, yet the atmosphere inside the court was thick with public curiosity and moral certainty. Lee stood before the judge, calm but unshaken, declaring again and again his innocence. He told the court he had no reason to harm Miss Emma Keyse, that he had loved his work, and that the terrible events of that November night were as mysterious to him as to anyone. But the jury saw things differently. The fact that Lee was the only man in the house, coupled with the marks of blood, the paraffin, and his troubled past, was enough to seal his fate. After only a brief deliberation, the verdict was returned guilty of murder and arson. The sentence was swift and final: death by hanging. As the gavel fell, a hush swept through the courtroom. The young man from Devon, once a humble servant, now stood condemned as a murderer. However, even as he was led away, John Lee looked to the crowd and said calmly, "The Lord knows I am innocent." It was a moment that marked the beginning of one of the most extraordinary sagas in Victorian legal history, a story that would soon defy the gallows themselves. On the morning of 23rd of February, 1885, the condemned man, John Babbacombe Lee, was led to the gallows inside Exeter Prison. The air was cold, the witnesses solemn, and the executioner ready to perform his grim duty. Everything had been tested, the ropes, the levers, the trapdoor, all in perfect working order. But when the signal was given and the lever pulled, the unthinkable happened. The trapdoor refused to open. The mechanism was checked, reset, and tried again a second time. It failed. A third attempt was made. And still the door held firm below Lee's feet. Each failure deepened the silence, turning disbelief into awe. Even the hardened officials present began to whisper of divine intervention. The executioner and the prison's medical officer refused to continue. Word of the failed hanging spread rapidly, shocking the public and press across Britain. The Home Secretary soon intervened, ruling that the law had done all it could. John Lee's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. From that day forward, he became known to history as the man they couldn't hang. What should have been the end of his life instead became the beginning of a legend, one that would haunt the corridors of Victorian justice for generations to come. After his miraculous reprieve from the gallows, John Babbacombe Lee began a new chapter, not of freedom, but of confinement. For 22 long years, he remained behind the stone walls of Exeter Prison, a living legend known throughout Britain as the man they couldn't hang. During his imprisonment, Lee kept steadfast in his claim of innocence. Visitors and journalists who met him described a quiet, reflective man, one who believed his survival was proof of divine justice. His story became a symbol of both faith and fate, echoing through Victorian newspapers and public debates on capital punishment. In 1907, after more than 2 decades in captivity, Lee was finally released. Seeking a fresh start far from the shadow of Babbacombe Bay, he emigrated to the United States, settling in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There, he lived a modest life under his own name, far removed from the sensational headlines that once defined him. He died around on March 1945, closing the final page of one of Britain's most extraordinary true crime history. To the end of his days, John Babbacombe Lee maintained his innocence, the man who walked away from the noose, whose name endures in history as a reminder that even in the darkest moments of justice, mystery sometimes prevails. The story of John Babbacombe Lee endures as one of the most remarkable chapters in British legal history, a case where the machinery of death itself seemed to rebel against injustice. His failed execution at Exeter Prison made headlines across the world, earning him the haunting yet legendary title, The Man They Couldn't Hang. Newspapers, plays, and films later retold his story, transforming a humble servant from Devon into a symbol of fate's mysterious hand in the courtroom of life. Beyond its drama, the case holds lasting legal and moral significance. It remains one of the rare instances where a death sentence was commuted after the execution mechanism failed, a moment that forced Victorian England to confront its faith in both justice and divine providence. Historians and legal scholars continue to revisit the trial, noting that the evidence against Lee was weak and largely circumstantial. Many question whether he was truly guilty of the murder of Emma Keyse or merely a victim of class prejudice and flawed investigation. More than a century later, John Lee's name still echoes through the halls of true crime history, a chilling reminder that truth, like justice, does not always fall when the lever is pulled. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.